good evening or morning or, whatever. Good time of the day that it is for you. I'm Red, and today I'm going to be reading some r/MaliciousCompliance. And you will enjoy it. Okay? Okay, let's get going with the first story. Work all night? Okay. I used to work in the legal industry as a junior paralegal. My boss, a paralegal, was horrible. She had a long history of abusive behavior toward her subordinates. Once she informed me that I wasn't paid to make decisions, I was paid to follow orders. There was a case that was closing soon. Attorneys were expected to work all night on it, so she asked me to go home early and return to work in the middle of the night to be available all night. I got back and there was nobody else there at all. I had some filing that I could work on, but only about an hour, and I was there for about 10 hours. But I was told to stay there all night, so I did. When she got to work the next morning, I let her know. I was here and looked for the attorneys, but nobody was here and nobody told me they didn't need me. I thought maybe they may come back, so I stayed. She was upset that I didn't just go home, and she complained that I didn't have billable hours for that time. She made an ugly comment to the effect of, "At some point, you should have decided to go home." I said, "Per your email, I'm not paid to make decisions. I'm paid to follow orders. You told me to be here all night." I had the receipts. She could do nothing. Later, she tried to assign me to a case that was a conflict of interest due to household employment. I disclosed it and she got mad and demanded my resignation on my birthday. I told her no and went to HR. She told HR I was a terrible employee and none of the attorneys liked me. So I showed HR the emails from the attorneys that contradicted her. I ended up transferring to a different group. I had a kid and took maternity pay and then quit. She continued on with others the way she did with me and wound up getting fired. It took a while, but she did have a consequence. Oh gosh, what a horrible woman. It's like, okay, so it's like that thing where you're not the bottom rung, but you're not really anywhere near someone who has a lot of power. So you really, really take advantage of the people who you do have some power over because you're just power hungry. Yeah, people like that. You know what? Karma gets them eventually. Are you ready for another story? You are? Fantastic, because here it is. My mum ends up ruining the life of her ex-boss during an exit interview. So back in the 1990s, my mum worked for this big-time company, we'll call it Company W, as an accountant. Her boss, the head of finance, was a sleazy guy, and despite being semi-wealthy, it was a big company, and married with kids, he always tried to pick up younger women in the office. Eventually, after a few years, my mum, being the amazing accountant she is, noticed small irregularities in several statements. I don't know the technical terms, but Mum realised that someone was embezzling the company's money for at least a couple of decades. Concerned, she brought it up to the head of finance, who proceeded to demean her, call her names, botch her claim, and basically threatened to fire her if she brought it up again. My mother is not one to start crying, and instead sought to prove him wrong. However, a couple of months later, head of finance brought in a new lady, young, she was legit blonde, fresh out of college, to train under Mum. My mother instantly knew what this was and started putting out feelers for a new job. In the meanwhile, she trained the younger lady who, to quote my mum, was not the brightest bulb. Now, Company W had a policy when an employee was going to be fired. If the employee was being fired for reasons other than rule-breaking, violations, etc., they would be allowed to say that they quit to be able to give their week's notice and get pay. A fair policy. So one day, my mum was summoned to head of finance and told that he was firing her. She quickly countered and used the policy to her advantage, which angered head of finance, but he had to comply. The malicious compliance I know you're waiting for? Head of finance told my mother in a rather rude way that since she was going about it that way, she might as well do an exit interview. My mother literally had a light bulb moment and said to him that in that case she would. An exit interview is a formal way of leaving a job, akin to an interview for getting a job. It's a way for employees to share their experience and why they're leaving for records, including HR. You can see where this is going. So she was scheduled for an exit interview. When she went in, my mother had to, of course, bring in files related to her work. And showed to the interviewer. My mom brought in 3 large boxes of files, each one containing evidence of the embezzlement. She then presented it to the interviewer, who my mother told me was rather stunned, and proceeded to hand over all the evidence and proceed with her exit, including talking about the head of finance's reaction and how, not long after, the new lady was brought in to replace her. Mum then left the company that day and got new employment and moved on. It was a decade later that she learned what happened. My dad was a delivery driver at the time and actually made a delivery to Company W. While there, he talked with an employee, mentioned my mum had worked there and how she'd left. And then the employee told him quite the juicy story. In the year following my mother's departure and interview, her evidence was brought to HR and the CEO, who ordered an internal investigation. Hidden cameras were placed in the accounting division. Every file made was screened and photocopied. Tiny details scrutinized and bank records triple checked. But I think you can see where this is going. Yep, the head of finance was embezzling from Company W. But it gets better. They got him on camera making out with the new lady inside the main office after hours. To add insult to injury, the cameras also caught him being cruel to those under him, touching other women, etc. But the biggest thing was still the embezzlement. Head of finance managed to, in over 30 years, steal over $1 million from Company W's earnings. From his days there as a mere accountant and all through his promotions. Now, the exact way he was able to get that much over time wasn't told to my dad. I doubt the employee knew. But he did know the fallout. The head of finance was summoned to the Big Cheese's office the day after the evidence was compiled. And let's just say, head of finance wished he had simply been fired. He was arrested for the embezzlement and for sexual misconduct, or something like that, as well as a few other things my mum can't recall. The new lady who came in actually revealed that he had brought her in after starting to date her, and even revealed to her what he was doing. Her job basically had been to help him cover it up so they could live the rich life. She didn't even know what exactly accounting was, other than managing money. The perfect cover, so to speak. And if now the ex-head of finance thought being arrested and charged was bad enough, when his wife found out... The employee who told my dad this hadn't been present when the wife had come in while the ex-head of finance had been let out, but a friend of his had seen what happened. She had just went up, smacked the now ex-head of finance, screamed obscenities at him, before saying she'll be seeing him in court for a divorce. While my dad couldn't learn what exactly happened next, what was clear was that guy's life was ruined. And my mum, while not a vindictive person by any means, did feel somewhat joyful over the outcome. Lesson to be learned here? Never screw with an accountant who actually knows what they're doing. That's fantastic. I love that so much. I really hope you guys enjoyed those r/MaliciousCompliance stories read by me. Read! Please give the video a like, because that really helps me out, you know. And also subscribe, because that also helps me. And I know you want to help me because obviously you like me, or you wouldn't be here at the end of the video. Thanks so much for watching today, guys. Bye-bye.